we'll start our story by looking at this guy called Benedict. Benedict is a guy that is very, very hungry and very thirsty. However, if he's actually equally hungry and equally thirsty, but luckily enough, he suddenly sees food and a drink, and he's very happy that he finally could eat and drink, because if he won't eat and drink, he will die. However, he notices that they're actually equally distant from him. And as Spinoza says, if a man were placed in such a state of equilibrium, he would perish of hunger and thirst, supposing he perceived nothing but hunger and thirst, and the food and drink were equidistant from him. So he will actually, the poor guy will actually die. However, it seems like as if this is a very rare and unusual situation in which the things are equally distant. But in a way, I think that these cases are more common than what we think. We go to the supermarket and we're standing in front of all these merchandise that are exactly identical, and we have to pick one of them out of all of these. And the question is, do we perish and die in the supermarket? The answer we know is not, but the question is why. However, I will term these situations following Edna Margalit and Morgenbesser, picking scenarios. These are picking scenarios, meaning that an agent has to select freely from alternatives in which there is no reasoned preference of one alternative over the other. This is opposed to a choosing scenario. Okay, I'm using this terminology. Choosing scenarios in which an agent, giving the context, one's self-identity, things one cares about, etc., has a reasoned preference of one alternative over the other. So the question is, what happens in these picking situations? I'll say a few philosophical words, and then we'll continue to science. So Newton, although he was a scientist, he was also a philosopher. He disagrees with what we just said, that a person is paralyzed or would perish given a picking scenario. He claims in letters which he wrote to Leibniz, he claims that Leibniz supposes that motives have the same relation to the will of an intelligent agent as weights have to a balance, so that of two things absolutely indifferent, an intelligent agent can no more choose either than a balance can move itself when the weights on both sides are equal. But the difference lies here. This is what he claims. A balance is no agent, but is merely passive and acted on by the weights, so that when the weights are equal, there is nothing to move it. But intelligent beings are agents. They have active powers and do move themselves, sometimes on the view of strong motives, sometimes on weak ones, and sometimes where things are absolutely indifferent. Okay, if we have indifference, that's where the agent comes in. That's what Newton is claiming. That's where the agents come in, and that's where we move ourselves. We pick. However, Leibniz rejects Newton's stance and claims that it is a mere contradiction. But however, on the other hand, he claims that we are never indifferent, even when we appear to be most so, as for instance, over whether to turn left or right at the end of a lane. For the choice that we make arises from these insensible stimuli. Okay, so there's some insensible stimuli and insensible impressions, what he calls in another place conjunction of minute perceptions. Anyhow, these things can suffice to tilt the balance. So we have these different opinions about picking. We have Spinoza on the one hand, you'll die, Newton that no, this is exactly agency, is to act in these cases, and Leibniz, which actually agrees with Spinoza, but says in the world there's always a difference. And we're interesting what happens in this process of picking in this picking situation. So although on a reason-based level, there is symmetry between the alternative, on a neuronal level, we assume there must be some asymmetry breaking the tie, because we know that we choose, that we pick. So the source of this neuronal asymmetry could be an external subliminal bias, as Leibniz says, or some kind of internal bias that we have, but we're not aware of. It's not part of our reason-based thoughts. And it could be some kind of like a coin tossing metaphor, some kind of random event which will tilt us one way or another. However, whatever we think, what we're looking for is a break of the symmetry. So however the symmetry is broken, if it's some kind of discrete moment, so we would assume that there is no room for regret or second thoughts, because remember, we're talking about cases in which we are a picking case in which we have there's no preference of one or the other. So if we're tilted into one direction, I assume that we'll continue in that direction and not regret what we're doing or change our mind or something like that. Okay, so now let's go more into let's research it a little. So if we're looking for this neuronal asymmetry, I propose an experiment that we actually ran, and we have results. So the experiment is the following: we have a participant sitting in front of a screen. The screen has a fixation point, and the participant is fixating, and then the next stage there is an arrow. The arrow is, I don't know if you see my arrow, mouse, but there's an arrow which is called the prime arrow, which appears for 20 milliseconds. It's either to the right or to the left, or it's a neutral arrow which has no direction, or both directions, to the right and to the left. And that is only for 20 milliseconds. So it's very rapid, and immediately afterwards appears a mask for 40 milliseconds. This is called a masked prime, and the participants are usually unaware of this prime. And I'll show you later, we took only participants that were not aware. So there's sometimes participants are aware of this prime, but in this analysis, we're taking only participants who are not aware of this prime. Okay, so there's an arrow to the right or to the left, and right after that, there's a Q. If the Q is a plus, that means it's a free choice picking Q, which the participant has to press with his right hand or the left hand on a button, according to whatever he or she wants at that moment of the Q. So there's a prime, masked prime, and then there's a free choice picking Q. That's one type of trial. It's combined with other types of trials, which could have an arrow cue, which is an instructing cue, which is to the right or to the left, and then the participant has to press right or left according to the arrow. Okay, so you have trials which are free choice picking. He has no preference pressing right or left, so it's free choice picking, or instructed trials in which he has to press right or left. But the beginning, they both have the same beginning of a masked prime in the beginning. And so we have the participant pressing right or left, and then we have different types of trials. We have the congruent trials. Those are trials in which in the instructing cue, in the case where there is instruction, so instructing cue or the free choice response direction are identical to the prime direction. Okay, that is called a congruent trial. I mean, in a free choice, you have no direction except for the response. So we map the response to the prime, and that is a congruent trial. And in the incongruent trials, they're in opposite directions, the response and the arrow of the prime. And the neutral trials are the trials in which the prime was a neutral prime. Okay, so this is the paradigm, the experimental procedure, and only subjects who were unaware of the prime were included. Okay, I won't show you how we, if someone's interested in the end, I could explain how we decided who was unaware, but only subject to unaware were taken into account here. Okay, so let's see the results of this. So we have the behavioral priming effect is as followed. If we looked in the instructed trials in which we were instructed to do to press right or left, and we had a prime. So the incongruent reaction time is much slower than the congruent reaction time. Okay, and the neutral is in the middle. Moreover, we also have more errors, higher percentage of errors in the incongruent case than in the congruent case. So that's what happens when the either the instruction and the prime oppose each other or agree with each other. These are the results in the instructed case. In the free choice case, what we see at the reaction time, when someone chooses against the prime, okay, he's free to choose and he chooses against the prime, that's an incongruent case, then the reaction time is much longer than when he chooses with the prime direction. And we have an effect of the prime, and about the prime pushes you to choose in about 60% of the times according to the prime. Okay, you're not aware of the prime, however, you're affected by it and you freely choose whatever you want, but you go in the direction of the congruent prime in 60% of the time. That fits what Leibniz says, basically, that you have this insensible stimuli, and that's the prime, and you act accordingly. However, in the interesting case would be what happens actually in the incongruent case. Why is there 40% that we go against the prime? Maybe we're not aware of it. I mean, maybe we're not even not aware. We're not aware of it, but maybe it's not even processed. Maybe we blinked. I don't know. We'll find out more. Okay, so this is behavioral, and note another behavioral effect is that the error response in the instructed case, the cases where someone did an error, the reaction time in the error is much faster on the right-hand side, that's the error side, than on the left-hand side, which is the correct response. Okay, so when the errors are usually fast errors, as opposed to the regular response. Okay, so now we know that definitely something has been processed by the subliminal prime, and it affects us, and it has been processed. So now we're going to go to these subjects had a EEG on cap on them. We're measuring the electrical potential on their scalp, and so measuring the EEG helps us look now at the dynamics of what is happening in the motor areas that we're interested in in this process of priming and building up one's intentions of movement. So the EEG, we had 64 electrodes, as you can see here, and we are basically interested in the motor electrodes, since when someone presses with his right and left hand, what you basically get is the following mapping. In a left hand press, you will see higher negativity on the right hand side, and in the right hand press, you'll see higher negativity on the left hand side. So the contralateral side is the side which is more active compared to the ipsilateral side. So what the measurement we are going to use is called the lateralized readiness potential, in which we will take an electrode over the motor area from the left side, and we will do the difference between the left side, or between the contralateral and the ipsilateral. Okay, and we'll start with the difference between the left side electrode and the right side electrode, and then we will get the following curve. And this figure, you have to, in order to it's called the lateralized readiness potential. In order to get it, you have to average over many trials and many participants, because the EEG is noisy, is a noisy signal, and in order to recover, to see the signal, we have to average. So this average is locked to the response. That's a common thing to do in order to see this lateralized readiness potential. And what we see here, since we did the left minus the right, so for a right button press, for a right movement, we will see it going this way, and for a left hand movement, we would see the signal going that way. So in a way, we have a way of looking at the preparation. The lateralized readiness potential is considered a preparation for movement through the EEG signal. So what we will do now is we will look at the results. However, I want to add one more, two comments. One, since we're interested in the priming effect, how one is affected by the prime, we won't lock the average to the response. However, we will lock it to the prime, to the Q and to the prime. And another point is that I want to do the right hand and the left hand to average them together. So what I will do, I won't differentiate. I won't do left minus right. I will do the contralateral minus the ipsilateral, and it doesn't matter what hand you have. And so then we could average them together. And so what we get for, that's what I wrote down here. What we get is the following. So let's explain this figure. What we see here is a red curve and a blue curve. The blue curve is the congruent cases. So if we look on the top right here, so what we could see is the combination of two congruent cases is the subliminal prime. I'm using the letters R and L for right and left. Subliminal prime was to the right, the Q is to the right, and the response was to the right. That's one congruent, and LLL is the second congruent, and then we get the blue curve. And the right curve is the subliminal prime to the right, the Q to the left, and the response to the left. These are correct responses. So the Q and the response are the same, of course. And what we see, interestingly enough, is the incongruent case. Basically, what we see here is the following, is that actually we see the effect of the prime, because what we see is that in the incongruent case, one follows the prime, and then there is a change, and one goes in the direction of the response. I'll explain again. The bottom part that we see, the bottom part of the curve, is actually the responding direction. And so in the congruent case, it goes only to the downward, but in the incongruent case, first we see preparation to move in the opposite direction of the final movement. And this is an interesting curve in which I call a change of intention curve. Okay, change of mind is a little big because it's general, people change their mind, and I'm using here a more specific term that has to do also with preparation to move, which I think this is what we're seeing now, preparation to move, and that is an intention. So what we're seeing here is a change of intention, and one intention is the initial intention, which was never executed. Actually, it started preparing to move in that direction. The subject started preparing to move in that direction, but didn't move, and then he changes an intention, and then we have the final intention index. So this is a change of intention a curve which we see in the incongruent case. So, excuse me. Now the question is, what happens in the free choice? So what we actually see in the free choice is actually the same idea. Again, if we look at these letters on the right, so we had the congruent case is the R, and then the Q is a plus, and then the response is R. That's the congruent case. The incongruent case is an R, a plus. The plus is the Q of the free choice, and then someone responded to the left. So the incongruent case, we see a preparation to move in the prime direction, in which the subject, decided to overcome and move in the other direction. Now, decided to overcome is all very rapid. And if you see, this whole thing ends in a half a second and the person is not aware of the prime. So this decision is as we saw, we had 60%, which was congruent, and 40% of the cases are this incongruent case in which someone overcomes the prime. Okay, so that's initial intention index, and then we have the final intention index. Okay, I'm going to add another little point here, and that is that this notion of change of intention is even reflected in the EMG. EMG is the measurement we do of the muscles of the hand. So we have EMG connected to both hands, to the right and to the left. And what we see is that in a percentage of the cases, we have, if we look here, and these are different examples on the left-hand side, is the black is the responding hand. However, the red is the EMG activity in the hand that doesn't respond, in the non-responding hand. So what we see is that we have activity of movement in the non-responding hand. So what we get is, and then what you see here is interestingly, I mean, it's different than what we saw before, is that here these are not averages, these are single trials. You could see EMG on a single trial basis. And so what you see is single cases in which someone prepared to move in one direction, and it even activated his muscles, and then he changed his mind to move in the other direction. But don't forget, we're talking about picking situations in which all we want to do is break the symmetry. And I'll note one thing, that is that the percentage, of course, of the EMG activity is larger in the incongruent cases, whether in the instructed or the free choice trials. Okay, so that is the EMG. So conclusions up to now is that subliminal arrow primes induced motor cortex activation, creating asymmetry. That's what we're looking for, don't forget, in the motor cortex in the direction of the subliminal prime. The change of intention signature we saw allows us to explain the behavioral cost of incongruence, why it takes more time, of course, and why there are more errors in instructed cases, and why we choose more in the, sorry, not why we choose, no, that was the asymmetry, but it explains the reaction time and the errors, and both in instructed as well as free choice trials. And this change of intention signature is manifested also in the peripheral muscle level. Excuse me, the errors is also related to the asymmetry. So we have asymmetry, which creates the errors. Change of intention mainly explains the reaction time. Okay, so that is the phenomenon we see, but we're asking ourselves, why would a free choice picking scenario exhibit change of mind or change of intention? I mean, if we have, all we want is to break a symmetry, the moment it moved, why don't we act in that direction? Well, what kind of mechanism is there? And interestingly, it's interesting to see this notion of change of mind within picking scenarios. I mean, if you give a little kid, you give him a bowl full of identical candies, you'll see them deliberating, moving, no, maybe I'll take this, and no, maybe I'll take that. And they're deliberating between the identical candies. At some point, we get over it, and we're old enough, though we don't do that. But if you'll see someone in the supermarket deliberating between identical things, you would say, okay, something's wrong there. So we kind of, there is some kind of change of intention when these rapid, in these rapid cases, scenarios, but in a way, they're not observed out of our minds, because then we would be deliberating in these cases. So to understand this mechanism, so we propose a neural network model. This is a large-scale neural network model. So if someone's looking for a detailed model. So this isn't the case. It's a feed-forward model which goes through the perception nodes into the action nodes into the execution nodes. And but let's do this slowly. Okay. So we first have perception. The perception nodes. The perception nodes are built from two basic layers. The layer of the input, which is the left-hand side, which it could be a left arrow, or a different node is a right arrow. That's the sensory input, or a mask. Okay, so those are. I'm talking now about the instructed condition. Okay, so that moves into the working memory or to the pipeline of the perception, and so there's an activation function which stays with the same direction. Now these are activation functions, and the broken lines are inhibitory links. So what we get is, if we have a prime for a short period of time, then we have this node activated for a short period of time. It moves on in the pipeline, and then we have a mask. So what we get is basically we start with a sustained kind of a perceptual trace with a certain kind of decay, and then when we have the mask, so that cuts off the sustained perceptual trace. So that's what we have here when the mask comes up. So it inhibits, and the trace is cut off. Okay, so it's kind of a competition, and then we have the instruction. So that if the instruction is in the other direction, then we have the incongruent case, and again we have activation, and it continues inhibiting the prime. And if it's in the same direction, so we'll get another activation. So that's the first stage, and then it moves into the action nodes, into the response action nodes, which we divide into a left and right. Okay, we're working according to this task. So we're moving into a right and left hemispheres, and so we have the left node and the right node. So the left arrow goes into the left and the right into the right, and they have lateral inhibition. We have also a regulating node for all kinds of phenomenon, which I didn't show here, and all kinds of results that you need a kind of inhibitory loop, which we get by this regulating node. I'll just say a word about the phenomena which we need it for. It's for the case in which there is we have a prime, we have a mask, and then we have a instruction. If the mask is very extended in time and is about 100 milliseconds, what we get is a negative, we get the opposite effect. Okay, we don't get a positive priming effect, but we get an opposite effect. So there's some kind of inhibition that happens within the system if the instruction doesn't come fast enough. Okay, so that is the case. So the regulating node is important for that, but I'm not going into that. So we have that, and then we go into an accumulator nodes, which when crossing the threshold, we get an action. Okay, so this is the main structure. Soon I'll show you the basic functions themselves, but I want you to have in mind the basic structure. But however, this structure can never lead to errors in the instructed case. So what leads to errors, of course, you all know, will be some kind of a noise node, which we feed this Gaussian noise into the response layer. So that's what we have. Then that's how we get in the instructed case the sequence we see. I'll show you, and we get errors. Okay. However, what happens in the free choice? That's what we're interested in. The picking case, when someone sees a plus, what happens then? So we have a prime. So the priming starts the same process like an instructed. There's no difference. But what happens when we see the plus? So what we're trying to claim here is that when there is a free choice stimuli, it activates the free choice sense, the free choice node, and that there is no input from the free choice. It's not right or not left. The only thing it does, it amplifies the noise nodes which feed into the response. Okay, so this amplification is what happens actually when someone is caught into a picking situation, and that's how he resolves the picking situation. Okay, so what we did in this in this model, we actually the parameters we tuned according to the instructed case, and then we left the same parameters and added the free choice, which was just changing which was just amplifying this Gaussian noise. Okay, so in general, what we have is the input to the nodes with the weighted input, and this is the structure of the activation function, which what we're adding now is to the response node. If it's a response node, so what we're adding is an eta times this Gaussian noise. Okay, so if we look at the dynamics of the signal, what we'll see is the following examples. So let's say we have here so this is the input to the motor area, to the motor unit, and what we're seeing here is we know already these letters, the RRR. So what we see here is the prime was to the right, and then the Q was to the right. And now the question is, what was the response? So the prime was to the right and the Q is to the right. So we see the blue is the right and the red is the left node. So we see activation towards the right. We see here the example of the dynamic noise, how it looks, and we added this is in general, I should say, we added a decreasing threshold in order to make sure that people respond fast. It's part of the task that people have to respond rapidly. So it will happen by decreasing this threshold. So we get a response to the right. Okay, so we see a little bit here that this is the prime effect, and then we see the instructing Q effect, and that crosses the threshold, and we're pressing to the right. The incongruent case is the case in which you have, let's say, a prime to the left, so we see activation of the left, and then do you see here the lateral inhibition? So the left is going up, the right is going down, but then the Q is to the right, and it's strong enough to bring us up to the threshold, and then we press to the right. However, the error case is the case in which the dynamic noise is superimposed on the prime signal, and then it could cause an early error. So what we have here is the prime is to the left, so we see the prime, the red, but then it's with the noise, and it immediately crosses the threshold before we manage to respond to the Q, to the right Q, and so we have an error here. We have a left response, which is opposite of the instructing Q, but it goes together with the prime, and it's early, as we saw before, that the errors are actually the reaction times of the errors are small. Okay, and the final case is the free choice case, which I'll show you here. Is the case in which we had a prime to the right, and then we had plus as free choice Q, and the person responded the other way. So the prime to the right, we see here a little bit the blue going up, and then inhibiting the red, but then the noise is amplified when we see the free choice Q and you see this amplification, and that is enough to cause the left to cross in the accumulators to cross the threshold. So as I said, noise is amplified when free choice Q is perceived, and it has the ability to override rapid intentions cued by the environment. Okay, so we overcame the prime and we went in the other direction. So modeling, using this model, and since each case is because of the noise, so we average over the different trials, and we get the results nicely comparable to the real data of here's the LRP if you want. The LRP, actually I didn't define it. The LRP as a definition is the right node minus the left node. So that's the LRP. So we get nice results, and here we could see the percentage of errors, and you could see the reaction time, and the reaction time in the error case, which is smaller than the real case. And in the free choice, you also see how the bias in the direction of the prime, and the reaction time and the LRP. Okay, so these results come out nicely according to this model. But mainly the model, because it makes you think first of all about the issue of noise. I mean, in these situations, and also I'll bring that up again later, the question of the ability to amplify noise. I mean, I'm talking here, okay, we amplify noise, but is that something we could control? How do we control the amplifying of the noise? That's an interesting question. So again, the conclusions in the meantime are a key element is the interplay between perceptual information and internal noise in shaping the decision and action. I think that's what we see here. The model successfully accounts for the main features, as I showed you. And finally, the model is consistent with the hypothesis that decisions in instructed and free choice actions have the same basic ingredients and represent a continuum of varying degree of balance between internal signals from perceptual or higher level inputs and random internal neuronal noise. So in a way, you could see the free choice is a picking situation, but if you look at it in the instructed case, the instructed condition, you could look at it as if it's a choosing situation. I mean, there's reasons why to go. It's strange. It might be strange because it's not the way we think of something that we have to choose, that has meaning and that has reasons. But in a way, when we're instructed to do something and we have good reasons why to do what we're instructed to do. I mean, I'm a participant. I want my money in the end of the experiment. I don't know what. I have good reasons to do the instructions that I have. So I'm instructed to do something. I have good reasons to do it. So you could see that as as a choosing scenario. So in a way, an extreme choosing scenario, but a choosing scenario, and the free choice is a picking scenario. So this, and now I'm going to say something philosophical. If in philosophy, the picking and the choosing are seen as dichotomous. I mean, there's two different constructs. Here, what we in a way see, if the model is right, that it's in a continuum. I mean, we have noise also in the choosing case, also in the instructed case, and we have a signal there, and we have noise in the free choice, and there's some kind of signal, the prime, and it's just a matter of what the levels are of the degree of balance between them. Okay, that's just one a comment on the aspect of philosophy and science. But okay, going back to our model. So this is what we see. So in a way, amplifying neuronal noise can explain how one breaks symmetry in picking situations, and it can also explain it's also the cause of change of intention. So now we understand more, maybe the mechanism of this change of intention. However, what is free will all about? Is it amplifying neuronal noise? It's a question. Okay, so now I want to do to look at a case study in which I think we could use these observations when we come and go to this case study. So what I'm going to talk now is about patients with lesions, orbital frontal lesions, and they have these patients have behavioral I don't know if to call deficits or certain kind of behavior, which in a way you could see it as a deficient free will kind of behavior. So one behavior is they have impaired picking decisions. I mean, when they are in front of a picking situation, it takes them a long time to pick. I mean, they have trouble picking in a way, like the example in the beginning. Okay, so they have trouble picking. That could be explained if we understand their lesion as affecting their amplifier, the neuronal noise amplifier. Maybe the neuronal noise amplifier was defected, and that's why they have a problem in getting out of the symmetry and breaking the symmetry and moving on. That's possible. However, they have another kind of impairment, and that is they have impulsive. I don't know if it's impairment, but they have impulsive behavior, which could be exemplified. Let's say I have an apple on my table, and the patient comes into my office and sees my apple, and of course, he comes and reaches out to the apple and takes a bite from the apple. So, of course, it's not acceptable behavior, but that would be a kind of a impulsive behavior, which is what's called stimulus-bound behavior. I mean, he something in the environment cues him. It's like the prime, remember the prime, and then he acts according to that cue. And so in a way, he's missing something there. So maybe if we look at these patients with these two deficits, impulsive behavior and prolonged decision making, in a way they look like opposite issues. I mean, prolonged decision making is opposite than impulsive decision making. But maybe they could be explained with the same mechanism of amplifying neuronal noise. The amplification is something that got impaired, and then there's a problem. The amplifying neuronal noise could create asymmetry in the case of picking, and they don't have that. And in the impulsive behavior, it's a little more subtle, but it could avoid unwarranted action driven by environmental stimulus. And here you have to look at noise in a different kind of level, and more in a kind of an attractor model, in which a noise avoids being locked in local minima and avoids suboptimal options. And when they're missing this amplification of noise, they get stuck in these suboptimal options, which are cued by the environment, and then they stay. That's what causes the impulsive behavior. So the noise could act in two ways, and solving these two issues which look like they're opposing each other. Okay, that's just something we're now experimenting on, taking the same experiment we have now. I showed you, and trying it on patients with orbital frontal lesions, and to see how will they have the same change of intention kind of phenomena as healthy subjects have, and will they be cued by the prime more strongly than what others would? These would be the kind of predictions we would have if this would be true. Okay, so I'm coming to an end. So the points I think that are interesting to discuss are something I mentioned before. One is, can one actually control amplifying interstate neuronal noise? We could think of synaptic gain as something that might be, as it goes higher, we would have more chaotic noise in the neuronal circuit. Maybe that would be could give us a hint of a way of controlling some kind of noise level. And that's one question I think is interesting to think of. And another question is actually, which I think I tried to show through these orbital frontal patients, is does neuronal noise help maintain one's self-identity, agency, and free will behavior? I mean, the opposite of what we would think, that neuronal noise maybe would make us take us into directions which are against our free will. Maybe this noise is something that is, I mean, when we see healthy people, that's what they have. They have this element of noise, of course, to a certain degree, which if they don't have, suddenly they have these issues, these kind of, I could call free will issues or agency issues. And so with this, I want to end and thank my collaborators, Chaim and Leon. That's it. Thank you.